very passionate about. Let me greet once again the people who spoke earlier, Mr. Nike, Sam, Sheye. I've learned so much. I like the analogy you used about, reward always following value addition. I think if we train ourselves with that mindset, then we'll stop running after money and money will start running after us. Also, share your presentation. Coping mechanisms I have even devised for myself and find out what are the underlying problems that I'm building coping mechanisms around. So even though mine may not be substantial, our role in governance. I like the topic. I like the word advance. And, I think it has a huge implication. If we look all across history, when you hear advance, for me, all that came to my mind was it's a war cry. It's a charge to soldiers. It's a clarion call. If you say advance, there's a captain somewhere, there's a lieutenant somewhere, there's a general somewhere who is saying move. So what that tells me is that we are in a warfare. And as young people, there's nothing more dangerous than not realizing that you are in a warfare. You are in a warfare, it's the war of attrition. There is a process that has been going on for decades in this country, a process that is designed to render you weak, ineffective, and it is done through sustained attacks and pressure. Everybody who is young, you are below the age of 35 in this room, you are in a war. You are in a battle, and the sooner you realize it, the better for you. Everything that, the first speaker and second speaker have talked about, will equip you for personal success. But one thing I let people realize is that you cannot be successful in a nation that is failing. No matter what accomplishment you build for yourself, Mr. Dangote has to surround himself with serious security details because of the nation that he has built his wealth in. If the country was a country that was working and was sane, he would be able to move around in public with limited security details. He would be able to have access to other, the things that you and I take for granted, ordinary privileges. So he's sort of in a castle, in a bondage. That wealth in itself is almost like a form of prison. That is the nation that we have built, where when you become successful, you exist in a place that will consume you. And it's not ideal. Mr. Warren Buffett can move around in substations, in ordinary, subway design transportation in the United States. That is the ideal. We need to build a society where all of us can coexist, where the rich and the poor can move together peacefully, harmoniously. Not that the minute you cross a certain income level, you are now in a cage of sorts. So I know that the aspiration of every young person is to be successful. And I key into even the comedy skits that was shared here. It's such a hard country. Everybody wants to make it. But the minute you are so focused on personal accomplishment and you're ignoring the nation, the civic space in which you exist, you are deceiving yourself. And I realize that it is time to wake up every young person. Every time I have the opportunity. For me, you are like soldiers. You are dormant soldiers. You are asleep. You are not aware that there is a war that you are engaged in. You are not aware of your powers and the arsenal that is available to you. That is why you do not use it. And so I use every opportunity to charge you, to awaken. Arise, O compatriots. We are at war. We must take back our nation. The soul of our nation is embattled. We have to take it back because your success is hinge on the success of this country. Wherever you go, the speaker said it. He said if you are a lizard here, you will be a lizard in the US. So you need to wake up. And the first thing I want to talk about is the question of why. Because if you tell me my role in governance, and I'm not going to pretend or I have no illusions of the fact that the average young person wants to get out. That is the reality of the nation we exist in today, where everybody is seeking an escape route. If you're not going to do it through academics, then you're going to find a way through business. And now we're even resorting to cyberspaces and doing all sorts of unwholesome activities just to get out. So I understand that half of the people sitting here may be people who have already concluded that this is a wasteland. I see the commentary that we put on social media. I see the conversations. Maybe in this room are people who are still hanging on to that thread. And I believe that by virtue of the group that you belong to, there is that, will to still build and add value and be the light in this country. But I also appreciate that you are facing challenging times and you are really tempted to give up on this nation. So I need to be able to address the question of why. Why you need to play a role in governance, why you should advance. As a soldier, when the general wants, especially a soldier that has faced successive defeats in battle, the general has to pep them up, has to wake them up and remind them of the vision of where they are headed. And so I'm here to first of all establish that premise of why. The first thing I want to say to you is that if you are to truly, and you can confidently say that you are not a waste in the space that you occupy, that is the first reason why you have to play a role. Aaron Reed, who is a waste management expert in the United States, when asked, what's the definition of waste? A lot of us look at waste as that is discarded material. But he said, waste is a mixture of valuable items with embedded energy that are simply in the wrong place, in the wrong hands, or in the wrong time. So sometimes somebody throws away newspaper and the woman who is selling bolly picks it up and she converts it to a valuable item. What was somebody's waste, because it was in the wrong hands, became something of value in another person's hands. Sometimes people throw away glass, and then the wonderful artists like the Michelangelos and the Leonardo da Vinci's take that glass and all those waste materials and create murals that the world still celebrates today. So you need to decide, are you in the wrong place? Are you in the wrong time? Or are you yourself? Our nation say that, it's wrong for us to have you now. And for me, the Bible tells me that we were born for such a time as this. So whenever it is, whatever era you find yourself in, unless you can personally say that I'm a waste here, I'm being wasted here, I'm a waste, then your nation needs you. The clarion call is for you. Wherever you go and wherever you are situated, you have to provide value. You have to create value. And this is a time when your nation needs you the most. This is a time when the nation is experiencing the gravest form of challenges, where people who have held and occupied positions of power have repeatedly pillaged, raped, and cheated the nation of wealth. It is a time when you must arise and create value. So, as long as you are purposed and purposeful in your mind that you will add value, then this is the time to begin to think about how to help Nigeria. It's very important. Another thing I'm going to, use to sort of also remind you about why it is critical for you to rise up at this point in time. The truth is, science is that it takes about 250 years to wipe off common ancestry. In other words, the lineage of a person. So you were born today, you have parents. Even if you change your location and move to Canada or the US or wherever, your ancestry remains on this land and your roots are tied to this land for the next 250 years. That is 4 generations in every century. So wherever you go, and there are many people in different parts of the world whose roots still lie here. You may take away your trunk, but your roots will still be here. That's why you will still be paying what they call black tax. When you go away, you still have relatives that will be calling on you, please help us. And there's that emotional thread that runs in you to still help them. Even the people in the diaspora are so frustrated with the situation of things in Nigeria because no matter how far they go or how far they run, there's still the pressure coming from home to help. So you are like the Kililu bird. You are moving forward, but you are looking backwards. You are forever affiliated to the land where you are born, to the land where you originate. And as long as your passport is green, wherever you go, you will still be viewed as the Nigerian man or woman in Canada. So whatever image and impressions your nation builds still follows you. Whatever respect or dignity your nation creates for itself in the Committee of Nations, it attaches to you. Even if you are doing well in corporate America or corporate Canada, wherever you are, if your nation is in squalor, the people you work with, your colleagues, will always mock you as somebody who comes from that backwater. And Donald Trump will forever say, shithole. And it will affect you. It will rub off on you. So we have a role to play. We cannot run away from that responsibility. Again, I want to assure you that Nigeria is still a living thing. Nigeria is still a living thing. It is a living place. We are not a dead nation. And one of the principles I know of living things is growth. I know that we have been moving backwards seemingly for many years. And, you know, people will argue that, yes, movement, but in what direction? Growth, but how stagnant or how rapid? Yes, but for me, the minute you can attest that something is still alive, then hope remains, prospect remains, and that is the case of Nigeria. They have held us aground for decades, but we are still alive. We haven't given up. We've not given up the ghost. We are still alive and kicking. And therefore, the vision of Nigeria and the vision of Africa as the largest economic bloc at the turn of the century, with 4 billion people in terms of population and 60 trillion in GDP, is very possible. By the next mid-century, Nigeria is going to have 400 million in terms of population. And that will be largely constituted by the youth. Will you remain helpless, frustrated, dependent, entitled, angry, lamenting? Or will you be strong and reckonable at the table when they call the stakeholders? These are questions that I want you to grapple with. And then let's go to the role of young people. At this point, I hope that there are some people who are beginning to have a change of heart, you know, and are beginning to, look, my attitude is, if you cannot build this nation, please don't stand in our way. If you cannot build this nation, don't stand in the way of those who have committed their lives to building this nation. That is my attitude. So whether by your actions in terms of, I don't care what it is, please step aside. Speak no negative words. Say that in your house, but don't say it in the public domain. Don't do the actions or the criminal activities. Don't engage in those things because I consider you a threat and a risk. And what happens to risks? They must be eliminated. So it is a war. Friends, compatriots, make no mistake, it is a war. And when the serious-minded individuals get into positions of leadership, we will treat every risk and every threat to nation building and national development as an item and an object to be obliterated. And now, I want to talk to us about our role, the role of young people in governance. Every time I go into a formal group of people, I'm trained that way. The minute I identify a formal group of people, and when I say formal, you know, a group of people could be friends. But when it becomes formal is when they agree towards a collective purpose. And that is either put down in any institutionalized manner, either in a charter or formal agreement. They become a formal group of people. Wherever you have a formal group or association of people, look at it, check it, there is a governing structure. There is government. In this church, Wocom, there is government. If you have associations that you belong to, whether in your estate, there is government. The people who are very, very impactful in their world are trained to be sensitive to government. Government makes decisions over your lives. It is because of the cooperation of the church and the support of the church that you can have this conference today. There are always a set of individuals who are managing the resources and making the decisions that affect the outcome of your lives. It is inevitable anywhere there is a formal group of people, whether it is 3 people, whether there are 20, or whether there are 180 million people, there must be a governing structure. Nigeria has a government, a governing structure. These are people who steer the affairs of your life. They direct, they orchestrate the affairs of our lives. People in government, they exercise practices, systems, and they are institutions that essentially exercise authority over our lives. They make decisions in the closet, but it affects whether we are going to move on good roads or we're going to have good hospitals, or whether you will be able to access good quality education or you will have an inferior education that will not make you globally competitive. It will determine whether you will have access to technology and to the tools that you need to upgrade your businesses. It will determine whether you can take your products and your services to the global market, or whether you will be consumptive and constantly relying on other people's products to come in. Those people determine whether the floodgates of their markets are open to Chinese products and German products, or whether they empower their local businessmen and women to sell their own products outside and reduce tariffs for them. Those people determine every single thing that affects your life. When you wake up in the morning and you have dreams, the only thing that they don't determine thus far is whether you can breathe air. because that comes from God. But even down to water, whether you can access water, they have control over it. They determine whether you are born because they will certify you with a birth certificate, up to the point where they determine whether you are married or whether you even are dead. Because for your family members to access your inheritance, they will have to stamp a death certificate. This is how powerful these individuals are over your lives. They are not a set of people to ignore. Government is not a place that you ignore and you think that you want to build your business or be accomplished and you ignore those people who are making decisions that affect your life, that affect your schooling, that affect your savings. They can turn around the situation of Forex in the twinkle of an eye, and the dollars that you have set aside in your bank account suddenly are worthless. They can turn around everything that, even if you think, oh, this place, they can't affect it, they will come at you with wrong decision making, wrong policies that are formulated without a proper consideration for the masses. They will mess your lives up. Government and political action is not a thing to be ignored. But I realize that we are being raised, a generation is being raised with no understanding of civic education. You don't know your role and your duty as a citizen to engage those people, to choose and decide those people. And so it's important. If this is the first time that you are paying close attention to political action, please hear me and hear me now. You have a responsibility to choose those set of people who will decide your affairs, who will decide the outcome of your lives through the policies and, the laws and legislation that they pass. You have the power within a democracy to choose them. Many skeptics have called Nigeria's democracy a choiceless democracy, where even though you are told that you have the choice to exercise, the choices are already predetermined. By the set of factors that occur, they put the candidates, you have no choice in terms of who is before you. But I beg to differ. I think that the space has been so neglected that the outcomes are really, that's why we have little control over the outcomes. That's why two political parties can emerge depolarized, and it's the case of between the devil and the deep blue sea. If we played our role, our integral role, up to the point of mobilizing in our local communities, we would have a huge sway over what those big parties are actually fielding as candidates. You have a responsibility to choose. And as soldiers, let me remind you that the age of being enlisted in the army is 18. If at 18 you are qualified to die for your country, then at 18 you must be qualified to choose those people who send you to die. You have a responsibility to choose your leaders. And I'm not just talking about the point of PVC, because that's later in the day. It starts earlier. It starts when you understand your ward structures. For every one of you sitting here, you belong in a ward, but you are ignorant. You don't know. You choose ignorance. You belong in a ward. At that ward level, there are individuals who are congregating as your representatives. They are organizing themselves into recognizable groups that INEC will deal with, and all the institutions that select leaders deal with. But you don't know. You pay more attention to entertainment and to other things, but you compromise on the aspect that has the potential to render useless all your investments. Somebody said it here. You talked about hustle. How can you work so hard, work so passionately, work with such drive, and after you've amassed the little you have, you ignore that space that has the potential to destroy or enhance your investments? That is what government represents. I assure you, if you continue to ignore it, we'll continue to regurgitate the same set of clandestine kinds of individuals who never work in your interests. Wake up. There's nobody here apart from the younger ones who are below 18. But the average person in Wocom is above 18. It is time for you to get serious and responsible. If you're not doing it for the collective, if Nigeria, you're like lovers betrayed, you're so upset with your country, do it in your enlightened self-interest. Help yourselves. Get serious. Understand, find out where political parties are. Every Wednesday, I go for meetings. I go for them religiously like I'm going for Bible study. Because as I'm protecting myself and seeking the mercies of God, God expects me to be God on earth. Because he has empowered me and I'm God on earth. And I must take charge of this environment. I don't miss my meetings. At the meetings, I can determine who are the people that rise and become the flagship bearers of our party. I design my party's constitution. I work in committees. That's your responsibility. Your parents have sent you to school. You've acquired knowledge. You've gotten technical skills. For God's sake, use your skills. Use them for the betterment of your civic society, of Nigeria, of your state. Choose your leaders. After you have chosen your leaders, engage your leaders. Engage your leaders. Democracy is a dual lane road. It was not designed to be a one-lane road. If you do not hold leaders accountable, there is no miracle you want to, or magic you want to perform. There is no Messiah that will come down. You must hold they are your representatives. The underlying value of democracy is agency, is representation. So you are the principal. Those in power are your agents. But how do you leave your agents without holding them accountable? Even in our domestic homes, when people act for us or we give them resources to go and do our certain activities, we ask them to give an account of those actions. We ask them to show us how money was spent. We ask them to show us how time was, applied. But you leave those in government and you think that by some moral compulsion, they will act in the interest of the public. Human nature is what it is. It is vulnerable to power. People are intoxicated by power. If you leave me, even with my good intentions, I will be subjective in how I exercise power. I will fail in many regards. But even at church level, where people run on the values of Bible, they still build checks and balances around themselves. Because human nature is what it is. It is weak and susceptible to temptations. You must engage your representatives. But how do you engage who you don't know? And I don't care whoever you are. Wherever you are, you represent a block, a civic block. You are either students, or you are professionals, or you are artisans, or you are residents of a location, or you are traders. You represent a block. For every field of vocation you represent, there's somebody in your State House of Assembly who makes decisions that affect you. You have to engage that person. There is a committee that decides on education. There is a committee that decides on investments and trades. There is a committee that decides on everything that affects what you are doing. You should know them. You should know the representative of the area where you live. You should know the representative of the field, that is the vocation you belong to, and who is making decisions or disbursing funds. You should know the ministries, departments, and agencies that make decisions or allocate funds or disburse funds that affects you. You can't remain ignorant. And after you know them, go in, organize yourselves, move in groups. Wocom Youth Fellowship or Youth Wing can actually decide that if there is a road repair, I remember there was a road repair project just near the junction to your church, which in my opinion took too long. That's an indication that there's a group somewhere that could have approached whoever it is, a committee in government or some cabinet person or some department or agency that was responsible for that road project. I think you realize the project I'm speaking about. There was a portion of your road that was dug up. Even if it's just for keeping them on their toes, you could have sought a meeting with those people and said, we want to know, when is this project, what's the timeline given to this project? You see, when you do that, they are always on. They know that these people cannot be trifled with. They don't spend money anyhow. They render accounts to you judiciously and diligently. Whenever they are delaying, they will quickly make your place a priority. But if citizens sleep on their rights, they call it laches and acquiescence in law. When you sleep on your rights, then they will do and undo. And that's what has been happening for too long in government. Your other responsibility, very critical responsibility, is to contest for leadership, for public service. It is your responsibility. And I know that for a long time now, the church has taken that mantle up. And the church has realized that it is not enough for us to pray for our members to do well. But that where leadership fails, then it is a clarion call for citizens to step into the place of leadership. Public service is a domain where you must play. Because you, more than others, embody the values of leadership. Leadership is not position. Leadership is values. And by reason of the religion and that you practice, you are already trained in those values. You have to take those values into the public space. It is your responsibility to present yourself to become leaders. Where leaders have failed, then who are you waiting for to be the Messiah? You step up and you turn up. You show up. You show up. But young people have failed time and time again to show up, to step up. And one of the things I found is that at campus level, when we are undergraduates, a lot of us have begun to practice and exercise our muscles in leadership. Many of you take part in student leadership at faculty level, at campus level. But you see, you don't know that those ingredients that are already born in you, you should take them out and begin to play at a bigger level, at a bigger sphere. Oyo State local government council elections just took place. How many of us stood up to represent not even the entire local government area, but your council? Because I assure you, the bulk of the people who have come in there are reckless touts. And they will make decisions that will affect you because you did not turn up. You didn't show up. But you sit in your houses and you will lament. You will groan and you will moan and you will complain. Whose fault is it? 2 men had equal opportunity to come in for leadership. One came in, the other one stepped back. For God's sake, you must face the consequences of your abstinence. Another thing I want to say to you is resist every form of temptation to betray your country. Resist every form of temptation to betray your country. You are soldiers. Resist every temptation to betray this nation. I don't care the challenges. You are not the first. The people who have come ahead of us, they've been faced with similar challenges. Resist every temptation to betray your nation. When you engage in corrupt practices, you are betraying Nigeria. When young people engage in cybercrime and all sorts of atrocious, materialistic, tended, activities, they are betraying this nation. When you fail to vote in an election, you are betraying your fatherland. When you fail to pick up your PVC or to register for your PVC, you are a betrayer. Because in ancient warfare, wars were won by the swords and the darts, and over the years, even the guns. But make no mistake, an election is an overthrow of government. It is a war. We are overthrowing governments. The only difference is that we are doing so through the ballot. So you are an impotent soldier when you fail to show up at the battlefront, which is the ballot or the polling unit. Or when you show up or you are existing, you fail to carry your PVC. Your PVC is your weapon. You must pull the trigger. You must pull the trigger. It's not about your numbers, it's the effectiveness of those numbers. Right now, we are over 60% of the population. But what is the usefulness of being over 60% or close to 100 million people when half of you are impotent, dormant, sleeping soldiers? Get your weapons, arm your weapons, and on the day when we need to overthrow the wrong kinds of leaders, for God's sake, pull the trigger. Drop your PVCs in those boxes. Otherwise, you are a waste of potential resource to this nation. And for everyone who has failed in the past to do this necessary act for this country, you have cheated yourself. You have robbed yourself of the privilege of a nation that blesses you. You have to vote. If you are not yet 18, grow with that consciousness that at the age of 18, you must go to the polling unit. And if you find that security is being threatened when you want to, then make a lot of noise. Get INEC to send the adequate security deployment and details to your polling unit at your polling stations. Because nobody will cheat you or rob you of your right to exercise your franchise. But if we stay back out of fear, these people, they are very, very sophisticated in the game. They know all the buttons to press. They know all the, the tricks to play and the narratives to send out that, oh, there will be no security. Please resist every temptation to betray your nation. And finally, before I go, I want to read a letter to Nigerian youth, which was written by Professor Oluremi Shonaya, the flagship bearer for Kowa Political Party. I'm not campaigning, but what she wrote, for me, it resonates with every young person because she captured the grievances that many of us have with our nation. And at the same time, she reminded us of a future that is possible if we but rise up and act. Beloved young people of Nigeria, for years, I have longed to address you directly as I am doing now. I'm not going to read the full letter, I'll just read excerpts. First and foremost, I wish to apologize to you. Not that I feel that I have wronged you in any particular way personally. It is that I feel we have wronged you collectively as a nation. Things began to go really wrong in this country in the mid-1980s. And since then, has none of our leaders realized what they have done to you? What they have done to your future, to our futures? Did they not notice when the signs of despair and hopelessness began to appear prematurely on your faces? I apologize on their behalf. Many of you will be unable to read this book, not because you don't want to, but because you can't. We did not care enough to ensure that our schools remain places of real learning. Many of you have never even stepped into a classroom in your lives, and this has not bothered us. We left you to roam the streets as hawkers or sent you off to welders and mechanics as apprentices, even though you were merely children and your place was in the classroom. For several of you who managed to attain some schooling, the certificates you hold don't mean much because you never did acquire the real skills and competencies presumed by them. Indeed, we were accomplices to several of you who engaged in all manner of malpractices in order to pass exams that you should rightly have failed to even sit for. We pretended that education was important to us, but we were unwilling to invest in it so that you could live productive and dignified lives. Actively participating in global affairs and contributing your quota to our collective human experience. You could have had better lives growing up, but we completely impoverished your parents. Your father was laid off when production was almost ground to a complete halt at the factory where he worked. For all the wasted years, for all that could have been and was not. For your little sister who died of malaria or typhoid, and the accidents that killed several of your classmates on the Abuja-Lokoja roads or the Ibadan-Lagos roads. For the hours you spend fetching water every day. For the fumes of the metals that you are forced to inhale and the toll it takes on your tender lungs. For having to go hungry and not knowing what it feels like to have really full stomachs. For the tattered and tokumba clothes that you wear. For the filth in your neighborhoods and the shacks in which you live. I apologize to every youth. Secondly, I wish to salute you for your strength, your courage, your industry, your vivacity and your resilience. Your seemingly unbreakable spirits make you truly amazing. So many people around the world wonder where all your ideas and abilities come from. You excel in sports, you excel in music, you excel in dance, in business, and basically whatever you lay your hands to do. In spite of all the odds that are stacked against you. You must be the ones who have earned us the title of the happiest people on earth. I particularly salute you for a trend I have noticed among you in the past few years. So many of you older youths are involved in offering services to the less privileged in our society. You are mounting soup kitchens to feed the poor people. You are coaching pupils in primary and secondary schools, offering medical services to the needy, and engaging in a host of selfless activities. Talking to some of you about it, your response is that you desire to give back to your communities and your country. Where on earth did this come from? What have you received from your communities that you are giving back? What has your government or society really done for you? Wherever this spirit has come from,